Hey y'all, I'm James Wright, and welcome to my shop. Today we're making a Kumiko jig. So what exactly is a Kumiko jig? Well, it helps you make Kumiko, but that's another video. So today, let's dive into this. Walnut. One of my favorite woods. It is an incredibly easy piece to work with and just a lot of fun with hand tools. This particular block is a scrap that I was given a long time ago, and I've made many projects out of it. And it is a little over 2.5 inches thick, and it will be perfect for this. We're going to be making a large block out of this. And there really is no right or wrong size. Mine is about 10 inches long. A little bit longer might be better. A little bit shorter might be better, but somewhere around that. And I'm going to make it about I'm going to make it about 3 inches tall and about 2.5 inches wide. So I'm just going to roughly lay out those lines. So I'm going to smooth out one edge. That'll give me something I can then mark off of with the marking gauge to put in the thickness of it. And now I'm actually going to lop this whole block and pull this out of, well, kind of out of the middle because I had that tongue at one end. Once I get that, now we can rip it down. And walnut is incredibly easy for ripping, especially with a big handsaw like this. It goes very, very quickly, and it is a lot of fun. If you've never worked with walnut, it's made for hand tools. It is just a pleasure to work with, and it smells so good, and the curls come off, and they make you hungry because they think of chocolate, and yeah, especially air-dried walnut, it's great. Now what I want to do is I want to take one face of this and I want to flatten it down. I want to make sure this face is perfectly true and accurate because everything is going to be measured off of this face. So we're pulling out the winding sticks and we're taking it down to exactly where it needs to be so that these winding sticks are perfectly level, perfectly straight. There's no twist, there's no edge on it. Everything is great. Now that we have that face done, we're going to do the two long edges. And we're going to make sure that those are 90 degrees. That face we just made is perfect. So we are going to plane them smooth and then adjust them to be perfectly 90 degrees. And if they're perfectly 90 degrees to the face you know is true, then you'll know that the twist is out. Yeah, you can't always check them with winding sticks. But as long as they are 90 degrees to that face you know is good, then you'll know that that edge is good. We can flip the block over and do the same thing on the other side. Then once I know it's right where I'm going to have it at, I am going to then bring in the smoothing plane and smooth it out. Now that the block is exactly where we want it, we can start to work on all four corners. And we want to actually lop those off. And I'm marking that edge as my reference edge. That'll let me know that everything needs to be measured off that edge. We're going to have one corner that gets lopped off at 45 degrees. So I'm going to bring in my miter square, my unsquare, and mark down either side and then use the regular square to then measure across the top and the nose. And this will basically play connect the dots. To cut this down, I'm not going to use a miter box or anything like that. We're just going to put it in the vise and tip the block so that the saw is cutting vertical and run right down the line. You don't have to be exact on the line because you can always come back and plane it back too and clean it up. A low angle block plane works fantastically on here, or if you have a little Bridge City mini plane, well, why not use it? I know it's not really useful for anything, but for that, it works really well. And actually, in the Kumiko project, it comes out pretty commonly handy. We want to make sure that this is exactly 45 degrees, so we're going to check it regularly. On two of the corners, we're actually going to set them at 65.5 degrees. We're going to be talking about some weird angles on here, but yes, two of these corners, opposing corners, I'm going to set at 65.5 degrees. We're going to put my bevel gauge at that, mark down either side, and then use the square to connect the dots across the top and the nose. Draw all these lines, and then we're going to do the exact same thing we did before, chalk it up in the vise so that the cut is vertical, and then cut down it. Stay away from the line because you can always come back and plane it up. It's going to be a little bit of rinse and repeat on this, and each of these angles are going to be a little different. So one at 45, two opposite corners are at 65.5, and then the last corner is actually at 22.5. Crazy angles, but you need it. Now this is going to have to be at the right angle to the edge, as well as 90 degrees to the side. So we have that initial side that we flattened up and I marked as my reference edge. We're always going to be bringing the square back to that and making sure that this angle is both at the right angle and at 90 degrees to the side. Both of those have to be there, otherwise your joints aren't going to look quite right and you'll have one end of the stick that's fatter than the other. So always be checking it and going back and forth and getting it right on. It doesn't matter exactly how long this angle is or how far in it is. So if you're off a little bit, then take off more material and take it back a little farther. That really doesn't matter too much. It's just that there's enough on that face that you can reference a chisel off of. So here you can see we have all four corners that are square to the side and at the right angle, and we have a weird shaped block. The next thing we need to do is actually put some grooves in this, and these will be grooves that will house the Kumiko strips. So for that, I need to decide how wide do I want my strips to be, or how thick do I want my Kumiko to be. Usually, it's somewhere between a 1/2 inch and 3/4. I'm actually doing mine with a 5/8 bit that's slightly oversized. So around that size. If you make the groove a little wider than it needs to be, that's okay, because you can always use thinner stock in a wider groove, but you can't put thicker stock in a wider groove. And we're going to put it right down the middle of both of those edges. Here you can see I'm actually running against the grain, and I found out that's a problem. Most of the time it works out pretty well, but this one was just far enough off that it was actually causing me some problems. So to fix that, I actually had to flip the fence around on the 55. So I'm on the other side, and this would then allow me to go with the grain. Gives a cleaner cut and everything like that. In this case, I'm taking it down to 0.4 of an inch because my Kumiko strips are going to be 0.2 of an inch thick. And so I'm going to plane it down at that width down to around 0.4. Now we need to put in threads in the middle of each of these so that we can put a screw in to hold down these stops. And it's always wise, whenever you're putting in these thread inserts, test them in a scrap piece of wood first to make sure they work, and then you can run them into the actual piece. These go in the center of each groove, both center side to side and center end to end. They are 1/4 inch thread inserts, and they allow me to then put in a 1/4 inch bolt. Actually, no, I think they were number 10s. Number 10s for this one, not 1/4 inch. Now we need to actually make these stops that will then ride in these grooves and stop distances for these sticks that we're going to be making with the Kumiko. For this, I'm going to use a scrap piece of white oak. Came out of an old desk, over 100 years old. It's great stuff, and I've been slowly working on it over the years. I want these strips to then be 1/3 of the thickness of the groove. So if the groove was 3/8 thick, I want each of these to be 1/8 thick, but mine's a little over 5/8, so figure that out. Yeah, American math. I hate it. We're going to strip these down and cut them down. This is one of the places where a Japanese saw really shines. It can't have a back because I need to rip these down over 1 foot long. And if I use a large, heavy panel saw, then I run the risk of breaking the pieces off because I put more force behind it. With a Japanese saw, you put far less force behind it and actually march through these little sticks really efficiently. And so this is one of the few places where I do pull out my Japanese saw. It worked great on this. Anytime you're ripping thin stock, it works phenomenally for that. So we have these sticks that we need to then trim down, and I want these all to be the exact same thickness, and they need to be slightly less than 1/3 the thickness of the groove. So I can set the stops on my block plane here so that I can always take them down to the same thickness. Then we can bring them back over to the saw here and chop off 4 little pieces that are about 1/2 inch long, and then 4 other pieces that are of varying lengths. It doesn't really make too much of a difference. Mine were about 4 inches long and about 5 inches long, something in that range. Can glue it all together with super glue. Just a little dab on either end will do pretty well. And with super glue, you can just put a spring clamp on there, set it, come back a little while, and it'll be good to go. And spring clamps work phenomenally for little things like this. I have a ton of these in the shop, and I'm regularly using them. So we'll set that aside, hit with a little bit of activator, and we're going to do some of the cleanup on the main block while these cure. We're just going to chamfer all the edges very slightly. Just break the edge so we're not going to be splintering it. Clean up anything that needs a little bit of cleanup, any of the rough saw marks that were still on the noses. Just make it look pretty, make it feel good in the hand, and that's all we need, because all that's really important is the bed of the groove and the angle we cut. So now these are out. We can then shape them. We're just going to smooth down both sides, and then I'm going to put them in the shooting board and clean up the ends as the ends are nice and square. We want to then chamfer the corners so there's a little bit of place for dust to go in, and they can go in the block, and there you have it. It's done. It's a very simple little jig that allows you to cut very precise angles on very small pieces. And we'll be doing a lot more of this next week when we actually do the Kumiko work, but here you can see how it works. The chisel can then reference one side and then plane across and get a really nice, clean, accurate angle on these little pieces. And it's an incredibly enjoyable thing to make these little pieces and have them fit down in there and pop into place. And yeah, very, very happy. So much fun. So I hope you like it. We'll be doing the Kumiko next week, but until then, enjoy the jig. So there you go. This is a lot of fun. This is one of those jigs where it really doesn't have any other use other than making this. And we're going to be doing this. Will be coming out in next week's video, so stay tuned for that. It's the first time I've actually done Kumiko by hand. I've done it with machines before, but this is kind of fun to play around with. And we might be doing a little more Japanese work in the future. So a Kumiko jig, relatively simple project, but it allows you to really accurately get your measurements as long as this was actually created accurately. So yeah, have a little bit of fun, make something out. You can make it out of a big chunk of scrap you have or a piece of firewood. It is a relatively easy, and there's 100 different ways to make everything about it. So if you have any questions about it, let me know that down in the comments down below. I do want to say a huge thank you to everyone who hit the like, comment, share, and subscribe button. Those really do help out. Thank you for that. Also, I want to say a huge thank you to all the patrons on Patreon, members in the channel, people who've clicked that join button down below. Thank you for that. We do have several perks for you guys to say thank you, as well as special content for you, and a special chat group in the new Discord server. So thank you for joining. Without you guys, this channel would not exist. So thank you for keeping the lights on. If you do ever meet anyone scrolling over the side, tell them thank you. And until next time, have a wonderful day. This is one of those projects that you just have to cut a few corners to get it done.